They placed Brielle Ashen's furnace tongs in another woman's hands, while the whole foundry watched and called it honor. Not theft, not erasure. Honor. The royal fireworks foundry burned beneath the dragon palace like a second heart. All brass vents, black stone furnaces, hanging chains, ember troughs, and glass dome testing pits where royal flame was shaped into spectacle before it was trusted near a crowd. Tonight, every furnace mouth had been polished. Every worker had been ordered into clean aprons. Every noble gallery above the firing floor glittered with scaled banners, gold masks, and wedding fire lamps. Brielle stood among the foundry workers with ash on her cheek and old burn scars silvering the backs of her hands. Her hands were empty. That was what everyone saw. Not the years those hands had spent measuring dragon fire by breath. Not the nights she had held overheated shells steady while apprentices ran. Not the tiny cooling gaps she had forged into the royal displays so a celebration would not become a field of screaming bodies. Empty hands were easier to explain. Lady Eryssa Vale stood at the center of the firing floor in a gown of pale flame silk, her hair braided with gold wire, her smile soft enough to make theft look ceremonial. Across her palms lay Brielle's furnace tongs, black iron handles, silver hinge, dragon bone grips worn smooth by a maker's fingers, and jaws curved to hold living fire without letting it learn hunger. "Thy bride, right, and royal succession," announced Master Harold Othran. "Lady Eryssa Vale receives the foundry tool, rite of ceremonial flame handling." The workers did not cheer. They knew better. The nobles did. Their applause rained down from the gallery like sparks that had never touched skin. Brielle looked at Dragon King Tavor Merrick. He stood beside the central furnace in black ceremonial armor, bronze scales catching the firelight along his shoulders. His eyes were deep dragon gold, his expression disciplined, his presence dangerous enough that even flame seemed to straighten when he entered a room. He had the kind of face that made men confess before being questioned and women decide too quickly whether fear was the same as fascination. Tonight, he did not look cruel. That was part of the wound. Cruelty would have been simpler. He had not taken the tongs from her hand himself. He had only signed the transfer of tool right after the council declared Eryssa compatible with royal flame. Brielle had sent 3 foundry warnings before the transfer: cooling gap measurements, Faust flame risk, spectator burst radius. Tavor had received them under emergency wedding review and let the council mark them as worker obstruction. He had allowed the bride to inherit the maker's tool because the wedding ceremony required a symbol, and symbols were always more convenient when the maker stood behind them unseen. His gaze found Brielle across the fire floor. For a moment, she thought he might see the missing weight at her side. Then Eryssa lifted the furnace tongs, and the nobles applauded louder. Tavor looked back to his bride. Brielle's fingers curled against her empty palms. Lady Eryssa turned slightly, letting the tongs catch every watching eye. "I am honored to carry what has served this foundry so faithfully." Brielle heard the workers behind her go very still. What? Not who. A tool could serve. A maker could disappear. Eryssa's gaze slid toward Brielle with perfect sweetness. Some hands prepare greatness. Others inherit the courage to display it. The noble gallery murmured approval. Brielle did not bow. A foundry guard stepped closer, warning in the movement. She still did not bow. Her dignity was small tonight, but it was hers, and she kept it like a coal cupped against wind. Tavor noticed. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, in attention. Too late, perhaps, but attention all the same. The herald raised a white fire rod. For the wedding eve demonstration, Lady Eryssa will lift the royal compatibility flame and release it into the first sky bloom. Above the floor, servants drew back the foundry roof shutters. Night opened overhead, cold and starless, waiting for royal fire to paint it. A furnace attendant brought the compatibility flame in a crystal crucible. Brielle's breath stopped. The flame inside was red. Not gold red, not dragon red, not the deep bronze heart fire that answered the Merrick bloodline. Red like painted silk held over a candle. Red like heated dye. Red like false flame. Her eyes went at once to the vents beneath the ceremonial launch frame. The cooling gaps were closed. All of them. Someone had plated them over with decorative gold. Her stomach turned cold. The cooling gaps were not flaws. They were the hidden breath between firebursts, the tiny pauses Brielle had forged into the royal fireworks so the flame would vent upward instead of rolling outward into the spectators. Without them, even a true dragon flame could turn violent. A false flame would be worse. This was not maker pride. This was crowd math. A closed gap did not insult a craftswoman. It killed spectators. False flame did not know restraint. It performed obedience until heat frightened it, then it fed on the nearest living air. Brielle stepped forward. Do not lift that. The hall heard her. So did the nobles. Eryssa's smile thinned. The Maker speaks. Not Brielle. The Maker. As if her name were unnecessary now that her tool had been inherited, Tavor turned. What is wrong? Brielle looked at him, then at the closed cooling gaps. The launch frame has been altered. A foundry steward paled. Eryssa's voice remained gentle. It was beautified for the wedding. Gold plating hid ugly engineering. That was what Eryssa had called it in the review room. No bride wanted her first sky bloom displayed with worker gaps cut through the frame. It was made dangerous, Brielle said. A murmur moved through the workers. Eryssa lifted the tongs toward the crucible. Fear often mistakes refinement for harm. Brielle's jaw tightened. That was a court phrase. A polished phrase. The kind used by people who never smelled burned hair after a royal mistake. Tavor looked from Brielle to the launch frame. For one breath, he hesitated. Eryssa saw it and stepped into the pause. My king, if the ceremony stops because a displaced worker resents a lawful transfer, every house in the gallery will say your bride cannot command flame without permission from ash. There it was. Displaced worker, not maker, not guardian of the gaps that kept children alive under fireworks. Tavor's face hardened around duty. Proceed carefully, he said. Brielle went still, carefully, as if careful hands had not just been removed. Eryssa lowered the furnace tongs into the crucible. The jaws closed around the red flame. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the tongs screamed. Not metal against heat. Metal recognizing a lie. The jaws clamped shut around the flame so violently that Eryssa cried out and tried to pull back. The red fire twisted inside the iron grip like a trapped living coal, swelling brighter, angrier, beating against the closed jaws as if it had teeth. The noble gallery fell silent. Eryssa's hands shook. Release. The tongs did not release. She pulled harder. The dragon bone grips blackened beneath her fingers. Tavor stepped forward, dragon heat rising from him. Eryssa, let them go. I cannot. The false flame pulsed. Every closed cooling gap in the launch frame began to glow red. Brielle saw the pattern and understood the danger before the court did. If the tongs opened now, the flame would rush into the plated frame and burst outward through the foundry galleries. Workers, noblesse, children at the wedding rail, all of them in the path. Tavor turned to Brielle at last. Open them. The command struck her like a second theft. Brielle looked at the furnace tongs, then at the Dragon King, who had given her tool to a bride without asking whether the flame had ever answered her. No, she said. The foundry stopped breathing. Tavor's eyes flashed gold. People may die. They would have died quietly if I had not spoken. His jaw tightened. She stepped toward the trapped red flame, close enough for heat to paint her ash-smeared face. You ask me to save the ceremony now. The false flame beat harder inside the tongs. Brielle lifted her empty, scarred hands. Why do you only respect my hands when fire turns dangerous? Tavor did not answer. That was the first honest thing he gave her. Then the furnace tongs tightened again, and across the silver hinge, words burned through the old black iron. False flame held. Maker testimony required. The old burned scars across Brielle's hands opened in thin silver lines. The tongs were not asking for praise. They were asking for the hands that knew where fire was allowed to breathe. No one applauded after the words burned across the hinge. False flame held. Cooling gap testimony required. The noble gallery, so loud moments ago, had gone still above the firing floor. Lady Eryssa Vale stood at the center of the royal fireworks foundry with Brielle Ashen's furnace tongs locked in both hands, the trapped red flame beating inside the iron jaws like a furious heart. Each pulse sent a glow through the plated launch frame, and every closed cooling gap answered in dangerous red. Brielle looked first at the frame. Not Eryssa, not Tavor. The frame. That was where people would die. Eryssa tried to lift her chin, though sweat had gathered along her temple. Cooling gap testimony is a technical review, she said. It is not proof of theft. Brielle's scarred hands burned with thin silver lines. Then call the foundry workers. Eryssa's smile sharpened despite the pain. Workers are not wedding witnesses. No, Brielle said. They are the reason wedding witnesses survive. Dragon King Tavor Merrick stepped closer to the trapped flame. Heat moved with him, bronze and deep, the kind of royal fire that made ordinary flames bend low. The false flame inside the tongs did not bow. It thrashed harder, red light slapping across his armor. His gaze cut to Brielle. What is false flame? The question struck harder than it should have. Not because he asked, because he had not asked before signing the transfer. Brielle did not soften. The warning I sent you under emergency wedding review. The foundry workers behind her went silent in a different way. Tavor's jaw tightened. Answer me. You had 3 answers. Cooling, gap measurements, false flame risk, spectator burst radius. The council called them worker obstruction. Eryssa drew in a sharp breath. Because they were obstruction. The ceremony cannot be held hostage by every soot-handed fear. Brielle turned toward her. Fear keeps families alive when nobles want prettier fire. The red flame snapped inside the tongs. Eryssa flinched. Brielle stepped toward the launch frame, stopping just outside the heat wash. True Merrick Heartfire recognizes pressure. It climbs when given an upward vent. It folds when the cooling gaps breathe between bursts. It knows the shape of dragon blood because it comes from dragon blood. She pointed to the trapped red flame. That does not. Tavor's eyes narrowed. It is not heartfire. No. Eryssa spoke quickly. Dyed ceremonial flame is permitted for wedding spectacle. It has been used in processions, balcony rites, and noble arrival displays for generations. Not inside a sealed royal launch frame, Brielle said. The words cut through the foundry. A worker near the ember trough whispered, She's right. Eryssa's gaze snapped toward him. He lowered his eyes, but the damage was done. Brielle held out her scarred hand toward the frame. A hand display can use dyed flame because the fire dies in open air. A sky bloom launch compresses it. If the cooling gaps are open, the heat breaks upward. If they are closed, the burst surges sideways. Tavor looked toward the noble gallery. So did every worker. Servants. Guards. House daughters in wedding silk. Families leaning against the gold rail to see the first royal firework. The spectator burst radius had a shape now. Faces. Eryssa's voice went cold. You are frightening the gallery to reclaim a tool. Brielle looked back at her. No, I am naming the bodies your beauty would make. The tongs tightened. Eryssa cried out again, and this time pride could not hide the pain. The dragon bone grips had darkened under her fingers. The false flame was not burning her like fire. It was testing her hold, searching for a fear it could feed on. Tavor moved as if to take the tongs from her. Brielle snapped, Do not. He stopped. A king stopping at a worker's warning should have felt like victory. It did not. It felt like the smallest possible beginning. If you touch them with dragon heat, Brielle said, the flame will think it found the blood it was pretending to answer. Tavor's eyes sharpened. Pretending? Eryssa went pale. Only a breath. Brielle saw it. So did Tavor. The furnace tongs trembled between Eryssa's hands. The silver hinge glowed again, but no new words appeared. The tool was not a witness that solved everything. It was a trap. It had caught the lie and held it. The living had to speak the rest. Brielle turned toward the workers. Who plated the gaps? No one answered. Eryssa's voice softened at once. Careful. Foundry workers should not confess to unauthorized alterations during royal ceremony. There it was. Not denial. Threat. An older woman stepped from beside the shell-cooling trough. Master Ventkeeper Celine. Her hair bound in a soot-gray wrap. Her arms scarred from 40 years of measuring burst pressure. No worker plated them by foundry order. Eryssa's smile vanished. Ventkeeper, you risk your post. Celine looked at Brielle's hands, then at the red glow crawling through the closed frame. My post is keeping fire from eating fools, she said. A sound moved through the workers. Tavor turned fully toward Celine. Who ordered it? Eryssa lifted the tongs higher despite the pain. My king, do not allow a lower foundry dispute to infect the wedding rite. The flame is contained. The cooling gap review has made its complaint. Let the technical matter wait until after the sky bloom. Brielle laughed once. Everyone heard the lack of humor in it. After? She stepped closer to the trapped false flame. It pulsed toward her, and the silver scars on her hands opened brighter. After the frame bursts sideways, after the gold gallery melts, after families at the rail become evidence no one can repair, Tavor's face hardened. Not against her this time, against the image. He looked at Eryssa. Lower the tongs. I cannot. Then stand still. Eryssa's eyes flashed. You would command your bride like a guilty apprentice? No, Brielle said. He would finally command the person holding dangerous fire. The line struck both of them. Tavor did not answer. Eryssa's hand shook, and the false flame swelled. The plated launch frame answered, with a deep metallic groan. Then one of the gold plates over the cooling gap blistered. Beneath it, old maker marks burned through. Not Brielle's name. Not praise. Measurements. Gap width. Burst angle. Crowd distance line. The furnace tongs dragged the trapped flame toward the frame, not releasing it, only forcing the lie close enough to light what had been hidden. Across the plated gold, words seared upward in white-hot script. Cooling gaps. Closed by bride right order. Tavor looked at the burning words, then at the launch frame he had allowed to be beautified. Bride right had not touched decoration. It had touched the part of fire that decided who lived. The gold plate kept burning after the gallery stopped breathing. White heat crawled across the plated gold of the launch frame, steady and accusing, while the false flame beat inside the furnace tongs in Lady Eryssa Vale's shaking hands. The Royal Fireworks Foundry had become too quiet for a place built around controlled explosions. Even the furnace mouths seemed to hold their breath. Brielle Ashen looked at the words, then at the closed cooling gaps. Not at Tavor. She could not afford to look at the man who was finally seeing what his signature had permitted. Seeing too late did not stop fire. Regret did not reopen vents. Eryssa tried to call it decoration before the gold plate finished burning. Bride right governs ceremonial presentation, Eryssa said. It does not make the bride responsible for every ugly piece of engineering beneath gold. Brielle's jaw tightened. Ugly. The gaps had never been meant to impress anyone. They were narrow cuts placed by angle, heat load, crowd distance, and burst pattern. They were the small, humiliating truths inside a beautiful display. Fire needed exits, pressure needed mercy, and crowds survived only when spectacle was not allowed to pretend it had no body. Tavor looked at the words, then at Eryssa. Who authorized the plating? No apology, no softness, only the correct question, finally given teeth. Eryssa lifted her chin, though the tongs had begun to blacken the fine skin beneath her fingers. The Bride Right Review approved ceremonial refinement. Who authorized it? Tavor repeated. The review bears counsel witness. That is not a name. Eryssa's eyes flashed. Nor is it a crime. The false flame pulsed harder, swelling against the iron jaws. The furnace tongs did not open. They did not explain. They only held the thing they had caught, forcing everyone else to stop pretending capture was the same as judgment. Brielle stepped closer to the frame and pointed to the glowing plate. Bride Right made choose silk banners, gallery lanterns, procession flame color, and ceremonial presentation. It does not reach inside launch engineering. Eryssa turned on her. You do not decide the boundary of Bride Right. No, Brielle said. Fire does. A low sound moved through the workers. Tavor's gaze cut toward the gallery. Above them, nobles stood very still behind the gold rail. Servants clustered with pale faces. Guards kept one hand near their swords, as if steel could argue with a sideways burst. The red glow in the closed gaps deepened. Tavor looked back at Brielle. If the tongs open now? She did not soften the answer for him. The false flame enters the launch throat. Pressure climbs. With gaps closed, the first burst hits the frame wall, not the sky. The shell breaks sideways. The gallery takes the force before the roof shutters do. Eryssa's mouth tightened. You exaggerate to frighten them. Brielle pointed to the workers near the trough. Ask anyone who has swept bone ash from a failed test pit. No one in the foundry breathed. Master Ventkeeper Soline spoke from behind Brielle. She is not exaggerating. Tavor's eyes remained on Brielle. Can it be vented? Not while the flame is still pretending to be royal. Eryssa van still. There! A small shift. A held breath. A bride hearing the dangerous part of the sentence arrived too near the truth. Tavor saw it. What does that mean? He asked. Brielle looked at the trapped red flame. Merrick Heartfire leaves bronze pressure marks. It bends toward dragon blood and away from crowd air. That flame leaves crimson salt at the edge. She nodded toward the tongs. The iron jaws had begun to bead red crystals along the hinge, tiny and bright as powdered rubies. Dye residue, Soline said quietly. The gallery murmured. Eryssa spoke before the sound became accusation. Dyed flame is legal in spectacle. Yes, Brielle said. The agreement startled the nobles more than denial would have. Eryssa seized it. Then this is not false compatibility. It is ceremonial enhancement. Dyed flame is legal when it dies in open air, Brielle said. Seal it inside a launch frame and call it royal, and it stops being decoration. It becomes a lie with pressure behind it. Tavor's face hardened. Brielle looked at Eryssa. If the flame answered you, it would have settled when you lifted it. Eryssa's grip tightened on the tongs. It was settling. It was performing. It was blessed. It was dyed. Eryssa's voice turned cold. Careful, Brielle. A worker who accuses a royal bride of false compatibility accuses the council that certified her. Brielle met her eyes. Then let the council stand near the frame when you open the tongs. No one in the council gallery moved. Not one. Tavor noticed. The false flame thrashed, throwing red light across his armor. His dragon heat rose by instinct, but he held it back this time, remembering Brielle's warning. The restraint cost him. She could see it in the tight line of his jaw. Good. Let him learn that not every dangerous thing should be answered by power. Eryssa's hands trembled again. My king, command her to perform the venting. The foundry worker can save the display and file her objections after. Brielle laughed once under her breath. Still trying to make my hands useful after stripping them. Tavor looked at her. The words struck him. She saw it. She did not soften. Instead, she turned toward Soline. Bring the pressure slate. Soline hesitated. If I bring it, the council will know we kept test records outside review. Brielle did not look away from the flame. If you do not, the gallery may become the record. Soline moved. Eryssa's face changed. No foundry record enters a wedding rite without council permission. Tavor's voice cut across hers. Let her bring it. The command did not absolve him, but it opened enough space for truth to walk. Soline returned with a black slate marked in chalk-burn lines. Brielle took it with her scarred hands, and the silver lines across her old burns flared brighter. The tongs answered, dragging the trapped flame 1 inch closer to the slate, not releasing it, only illuminating what pressure wanted hidden. Brielle set the slate beneath the launch throat. The red flame pulsed once. Lines appeared across the slate. Heat color, dyed ceremonial red. Dragon response, absent. Pressure behavior, hunger-seeking side vent. Tavor's eyes went dark. Eryssa said quickly, ceremonial dye does not invalidate royal compatibility. The slate burned hotter. A 4th line appeared. Myric heartfire trace. None. The foundry workers stirred. The nobles above did not know foundry law well enough to understand every word, but they understood none. Tavor looked at Eryssa. Could you command true Myric flame? Eryssa's smile returned, smaller and sharper. The Royal Fire Council certified compatibility. Brielle heard the evasion. So did Tavor. The furnace tongs tightened once more, and the trapped red flame screamed through closed iron. Across the launch frame, beneath the bride rite order, new words burned through the plated gold. False compatibility certified by Royal Fire Council. Tavor looked at the council gallery. No one there moved closer to the frame. Certification, Brielle thought, had always sounded braver from a safe distance. No one from the Royal Fire Council stepped down. Not after the launch frame named them. Not after the false flame screamed inside the furnace tongs. Not after every worker on the firing floor looked toward the council gallery and saw 6 robed fire lords remain safely behind the gold rail, their polished masks reflecting danger they had certified from a distance. Brielle Ashen stood beside the pressure slate with silver lines open across her old burns, watching the red flame beat itself against the iron jaws. Lady Eryssa hands trembled around the dragonbone grips, but she still held her chin high, still wore royal silk as if fabric could separate her from consequence. I was certified, Eryssa said. A bride obeys certification. It was a beautiful sentence. Clean. Useful. A sentence designed to move blame upward without lowering her own crown. Dragon King Tavor Merrick turned toward the council gallery. Firelight carved his face into hard planes, but he did not apologize, did not soften, did not offer Brielle a pretty word to cover the ugly things still burning in front of them. Who certified it? One of the Fire Lords finally moved. Lord Vaust Rennick, High Examiner of Ceremonial Flame, stepped to the front of the gallery in robes of dark red scale-cloth. He was thin, silver-bearded, and calm in the way men became calm when danger stood several floors beneath them. The Fire Council certified a ceremonial compatibility category, Rennick said. Not a battlefield bond, not a blood flame oath, a wedding spectacle category. Brielle did not look away from the slate. False compatibility. Rennick's mouth tightened. Ceremonial compatibility. False compatibility, she said again, because polite language had already plated over enough truth tonight. Eryssa seized the council's phrasing. There, you hear him. It is not fraud. It is category. The false flame slammed against the tongs. The plated launch frame groaned. Several people in the gallery stepped back at once. Brielle saw Tavor notice them. The way nobles retreated from the thing their mouths defended. The way certification grew quieter the closer it stood to heat. Who signed the category? Tavor asked. Rennick hesitated. Only a breath. Enough. The review panel signed under collective authority. That is not a name. The bride's flame was acceptable for display. Not for that frame, Brielle said. Rennick's eyes flicked to her with irritated precision. A foundry worker is not qualified to interpret council categories during royal ceremony. Brielle lifted the pressure slate. Then come interpret it beside the frame. No one in red scale cloth moved. The tongs tightened again, and Eryssa cried out despite herself. Tavor looked back at Brielle. Can the pressure be reduced? Not save the ceremony. Not make this disappear. At least he had learned to ask the smaller, truer question. Brielle still did not soften. Only if the flame is held away from the launch throat long enough to vent the trapped heat through a manual gap. Eryssa's face sharpened through pain. Then do it. Brielle looked at her. With whose tool? Right? The words struck the floor harder than a hammer. Eryssa's eyes flashed. Do not play dignity while the court is in danger. No, Brielle said. That was your game. The false flame swelled again. A red line crawled around the launch throat, circling the sealed frame. Brielle's stomach tightened. The pressure was building behind the plating. Not enough to burst yet. Close enough to make every second matter. She set the slate flat on the floor and dragged a chalk-burn line across it with one scarred finger. Watch, she said. The slate answered her heat. A diagram formed in pale silver. The launch frame, the sealed gaps, the gallery rail, the worker floor, the roof shutters. The red pressure path spread from the trapped flame into the throat, struck the closed frame, then split sideways toward the galleries. Murmurs turned into fear. Not abstract fear. Measured fear. Brielle tapped the side path. If I open the tongs wrong, this is where the first burst goes. The silver diagram lit every face in its path. Servant, guards, house daughters in wedding silk, families at the rail, foundry workers standing too near the troughs because no noble ever measured danger downward. Rennick's voice hardened. Pressure slates can be influenced by emotional handling. Soline barked a bitter laugh from behind Brielle. Fire does not care how emotional the hand is when the math is right. A few workers answered with low agreement. Eryssa turned her pain into command. Then punish the council after the wedding. Save the sky bloom now. Brielle looked at her. The foundry seemed to narrow around that sentence. After, always after. After the display. After the applause. After the royal marriage was sealed beneath beautiful fire. After workers had repaired the danger no one wanted to credit. After families survived by luck and were told the ceremony had never nearly killed them. I am saving the people you keep calling background, Brielle said. Tavor's eyes moved from her to the gallery. The words landed there too. The people behind the spectacle. The hands beneath the gold. The bodies outside the official painting of glory. The furnace tongs jerked suddenly toward the launch frame. Eryssa screamed and tried to pull back, but the tool dragged the trapped flame another inch toward the sealed throat. Brielle moved fast, catching the pressure slate before it slid beneath the heat. "Do not fight them," she snapped. Eryssa gasped. "They are attacking me." "They are holding what you fed them." The tongs stopped, barely. The false flame shuddered inside the iron jaws. Brielle turned to Soline. "Manual vent bar." Soline grabbed a hooked black rod from the trough wall and threw it. Brielle caught it one-handed, pain tearing up her scarred palm in silver. The old burns opened wider. Tavor took one step forward. She did not need to look at him to stop him. No dragon heat. He stopped again. This time, the restraint was immediate. She felt it behind her, sharp and silent. Brielle shoved the vent bar into the narrow seam beneath the plated frame. The gold had been fitted over the cooling gap, but not forged into the original black iron. Decorative work was arrogant like that. It trusted surface. She levered once. The plate did not move. Her hand shook. Eryssa breathed through clenched teeth. Perhaps the maker cannot save the flaw she invented. Brielle pushed harder. The plate shrieked. A thin breath of trapped heat hissed upward through the seam. The pressure slate changed. The sideways burst path weakened. Not enough, but enough to prove the vent lived under the gold. Tavor looked at Rennick. "Her warnings named this." Rennick's face remained controlled. "Her warnings named obstruction, Majesty." Brielle went still. Soline did too. Tavor turned slowly. "What did you say?" Rennick chose each word with care. The submitted worker documents objected to ceremonial refinement and bride right transfer. They were classified as obstruction. Brielle stared at him. "Worker documents. Not warnings. Not measurements. Note false flame risk." The first wound had been that Tavor ignored her hands. The second was that the council had changed what those hands had written. She looked at the slate. The furnace tongs answered the movement, dragging the trapped flame toward the black surface. The tool did not open. It did not reveal all. It only gave heat to what Brielle had already forced into the room. Letters began forming across the pressure slate. Submitted warning 1. Cooling. Gap measurements. The hall went silent. A second line burned beneath it. Altered classification. Worker obstruction. Rennick stepped back from the rail. "That record is incomplete." The slate burned hotter. Submitted warning 2. False. Flame. Risk. Altered classification. Worker obstruction. Eryssa's face tightened. Tavor did not move. The third line came slowly, as if dragged through ash. Submitted warning 3. Spectator. Burst radius. Altered classification. Worker obstruction. Brielle's throat closed, but her voice did not break. "You did not receive obstruction," she said. Tavor looked at the slate, then at Hare. No apology came. Only the pain of a man finding his own authority in the place where truth had been buried. The pressure slate flared once more. A final line burned across the black surface. Warnings signed received by Dragon King. The line on the pressure slate did not accuse softly. Warnings signed received by Dragon King. It burned across the black surface in white fire, while the trapped false flame screamed inside the furnace tongs. The royal fireworks foundry seemed to tilt toward Dragon King Tavor Merrick, not because anyone moved, but because every eye knew where the sentence had pointed. Brielle Ashen did not look away from him this time. Let him feel it. Let him stand in the heat of the words that bore his title. Tavor stared at the slate. Bronze light flickered beneath his skin, dragonfire rising and being forced down by discipline. His jaw tightened, but he did not give the hall an apology. Not yet. Not while the launch frame still glowed red and families stood within the measured path of a sideways burst. Instead, he turned to Lord Faust Rennick. Explain. Rennick's expression had gone pale beneath his silver beard, but his voice remained polished. Majesty, signed, received, does not mean personally examined. Emergency wedding review passes through several channels. Your seal confirms arrival to royal process, not individual technical consent. Brielle laughed once. It was a small sound, ugly with disbelief. Tavor's eyes cut to her. She held his gaze. That is exactly how they bury danger. They make receipt large enough to silence workers, and small enough to protect kings. Eryssa's fingers clenched around the tongs. Enough. The flame is still contained. You can punish clerical arrogance later. Clerical arrogance? Brielle said. The false flame pulsed, and another seam in the gold plating began to glow. Eryssa's breath hitched. Brielle stepped closer to the launch frame. That seam has less than 50 breaths before pressure enters the gallery line. Several nobles above backed away from the rail. Not far enough. Never far enough when danger was invisible to people trained to see only ceremony. Tavor looked from the glowing seam to Brielle. Can you stop it? I can slow it. Do it. With witness. Eryssa's eyes flashed. You would bargain while the court burns? No, Brielle said. I would make sure the hands who warned you are not called obstruction after saving you. The workers behind her went very still. The word saving landed differently among them. Not heroism, survival labor. The kind always required, rarely named. Tavor understood enough not to argue. He looked toward the foundry floor. Any worker who signed, measured, carried, copied, filed, or witnessed the cooling gap warnings will speak under royal protection. Rennick stiffened. Majesty, foundry testimony during active flame crisis may contaminate review. Tavor's voice lowered. The review is already contaminated. Brielle did not thank him. A clean sentence did not erase a dirty signature, but it opened enough air. She turned to Soline. Second vent bar. Low seam. Do not pry upward. Twist toward the chimney groove. Soline moved without hesitation. Brielle knelt at the launch frame, shoved the first vent bar deeper, and set her shoulder against the handle. Silver pain split across her burned hands. The old scars opened like fine seams of moonlit metal. The furnace tongs answered her pain. Not by opening, by holding the false flame tighter. That was mercy, in a tool's brutal language. Eryssa cried out and nearly dropped to one knee. It is crushing me. It is keeping you from crushing them, Brielle said. Soline placed the second vent bar into the lower seam. Together, they twisted. The gold plate shrieked. A breath of red heat burst upward through a thin gap, then bent toward the roof shutter instead of the gallery. The pressure slate changed. The sideways path dimmed slightly. Not gone, dimmed. A worker stepped forward. He was young, soot still beneath his nails despite the ceremony apron. I copied the first measurement page. Rennick snapped. Name yourself properly before making claims. The boy swallowed. Toman Vale. Shell apprentice. Brielle kept her shoulder against the vent bar. Speak. Tommen looked at Tavor, then at Brielle. The cooling gaps were marked essential, not decorative. Brielle wrote the crowd distance line herself after the east test pit cracked. The slate flared. Witness 1. Gap measurements confirmed. A second worker stepped forward. Hessamorn, flame dye keeper. I warned that dyed ceremonial flame leaves crimson salt under compression. Eryssa's face tightened. You warned no such thing to me. Hessa looked at her. I was not allowed near bride review. The slate burned again. Witness 2. False flame risk confirmed. Tavor's eyes moved from worker to worker, as if the foundry had suddenly become a court he had never learned to hear. Good. Let him learn. Rennick raised his voice. These are lower workers repeating technical anxiety under pressure. Brielle's hands slipped. The vent bar jerked. The red heat surged toward the gallery path. Tavor stepped forward by instinct, dragonfire rising in his palms. Brielle shouted, "No!" He stopped so abruptly the fire curled back into his skin. The restraint left his face hollow with effort. The flame in the tongs slammed once against the jaws, furious at being denied royal heat. Brielle dragged the vent bar back into position, breath sharp between her teeth. "If you want to help, keep your fire out of my math." His mouth tightened. He nodded once. Not humbled enough, but learning in the only language the moment allowed. A third witness came forward from the record table. Master Innkeeper Jorel, who had not looked at Brielle once during the ceremony, now held a bundle of black-edged papers in both shaking hands. "I received the 3 warnings," he said. Rennick turned on him. Jorel. The innkeeper flinched but did not stop. They arrived under emergency wedding review, signed for by royal intake, then returned from Fire Council classification marked worker obstruction. Tavor's voice came cold. "Returned from whose desk?" Jorel's hands trembled harder. "High Examiner Rennick's." Rennick's mask of calm cracked. "Classification is collective." The pressure slate answered before anyone could. Council classification hand. Voust Rennick. The gallery erupted in whispers. Eryssa seized the chaos. "Then punish the council after the wedding. Save the sky, bloom now." Brielle turned her head slowly. Ash streaked her cheek. Silver pain shone across her hands. Behind her, workers held open the breadth of a frame that had been made beautiful enough to kill. "I am saving the people you keep calling background," she said. The tongs tightened again. This time, the red flame inside them changed shape. For one instant, beneath the dyed surface, a darker core appeared. Not bronze, not royal, not Merrick, hungry black-red, false flame stripped of performance. The pressure slate cracked down the center, and through the crack another line burned. False flame source. Unregistered bride vault. Eryssa went utterly still. Rennick stopped breathing. Tavor looked at his bride. Brielle looked at the burning line. Then every furnace mouth in the Royal Fireworks Foundry turned toward Lady Eryssa Vale. The furnace mouths did not roar. That made their turning worse. One by one, the black iron mouths of the Royal Fireworks Foundry angled toward Lady Eryssa Vale. Empty and silent, as if the whole chamber had become a witness too old to waste flame on accusation. The words still burned across the cracked pressure slate at Brielle Ashen's feet. False flame source. Unregistered bride vault. Eryssa's face had gone pale beneath the red glow, but she recovered before fear could become confession. "Bride vaults are ceremonial stores," she said. "Every royal wedding uses private flame reserves." Lord Voust Rennick seized the answer from the council gallery. Unregistered does not mean unlawful. It may mean private, restricted, or reserved for noble right. Brielle kept both hands on the vent bar. The old burns across her fingers were open in silver lines, and every breath of pressure behind the plated launch frame pulled pain through them. She did not look up at Rennick. Decorative flame does not make furnace mouths turn. Eryssa's eyes sharpened. "You are a foundry worker, not a vault magistrate." "No," Brielle said. "I am the one standing where the burst begins." Dragon King Tavor Merrick looked from the furnace mouths to the split pressure slate. His dragon heat stayed locked beneath his skin this time. He had learned at least that much. "Where is the bride vault?" he asked. Eryssa lifted her chin. "Beneath the bridal preparation floor." "Who accessed it?" "The Fire Council prepared the ceremonial flame." Rennick added quickly, "Under proper wedding authority." Tavor's gaze cut to him. "Names." Rennick did not answer. The silence told Brielle more than a list would have. It was the same silence that had swallowed her warnings, the same silence that turned measurements into obstruction and danger into category. The false flame slammed against the furnace tongs. Eryssa cried out as the locked jaws dragged her one step toward the launch frame. The red glow crawling through the sealed gaps deepened. Brielle shoved her shoulder against the vent bar and twisted. A thin breath of trapped heat hissed upward instead of sideways. The pressure slate flickered. Sideburst delayed. Not stopped. Delayed. Soline dropped beside the slate, her scarred fingers hovering over the crack. If the flame is still growing, it is feeding from somewhere. Dyed ceremonial fire should die once lifted, Brielle said. This one is getting stronger. Eryssa snapped. Because your tongs are tormenting it. No, Brielle said. Because something below is feeding it. The false flame stretched downward inside the iron jaws, reaching toward the bridal dais where Eryssa had first received the tongs. The gold tiles beneath her feet pulsed red once. Then again, every worker saw it. So did Tavor. Open the dais, he said. Eryssa's face tightened. You would tear apart your own wedding floor because a worker's slate twitches? Brielle looked at the red pulse under the gold. The wedding floor is already feeding the fire. Rennick raised his voice. Old source channels exist beneath the dais for ceremonial history. They are relics, not active engineering. Soline's mouth twisted. Relics do not pulse. Tavor turned toward the workers. Open it. No apology, no plea. Only command finally pointed at the danger, not the woman naming it. Brielle did not thank him. Soline struck the bridal dais with the second vent bar. Tomin drove a hooked rod under the edge. The polished gold tile cracked, and red light bled through the seam like a wound under silk. Brielle felt the pressure change instantly. Her stomach turned cold. Source channel, she said. The words moved through the foundry with more force than panic. Eryssa shook her head. Bride right permits ceremonial channels. Bride right does not permit feeding dyed flame into a sealed launch frame. Rennick said, that interpretation requires council review. Brielle finally looked up at him. Then stand in the burst line while you review it. No one from the council moved. Tavor saw that too. The gold seam split wider. Heat rolled across the firing floor. Families had been moved back from the gallery rail, but workers still stood at the vents because no ceremony survived without bodies beneath it. Tavor looked at Brielle. Can you sever the feed? Yes. Eryssa said, no. Too fast. Tobare. Then she forced her voice smooth. Severing a bride vault channel during royal ceremony desecrates the wedding rite. Brielle stared at her. Keeping it open desecrates the living. The furnace tongs shuddered. The false flame pulled harder toward the open channel. Brielle turned to the workers. Soline, high vent. Tomin, low seam. Hessa, die trough. No council hands. Rennick stiffened. Absolutely not. Tavor's voice came cold. The council certified this from a safe rail. They do not touch the fire. That silenced the gallery. Not forever. Long enough. Brielle drove the vent bar into the channel seam. Pain tore up both arms. The old burns across her hands opened brighter, silver against soot and blood-warm skin. The tongs answered not by opening, but by holding the false flame tighter, forcing it to remain caught while living hands did the dangerous work. Now, Brielle said. Soline opened the high vent. Tomin held the low seam. Hessa raised the dye trough lid to receive the bleed. Brielle twisted the bar. The bride vault channel screamed. Red flame surged upward, struck the narrow breath Brielle had made, and bent toward the trough instead of the launch throat. For one breath, the frame stopped shaking. Then the cracked pressure slate flared white. A new line burned across it. Bride vault channel active during compatibility test. Eryssa van stil. Renek stopped breathing. Tavor looked from the slate to Brielle, and the pain in his face did nothing useful for her hands. The slate burned again. A second line appeared beneath the first. Tool right transfer used to bypass maker safety test. The safety line made Eryssa grip the furnace tongs like a stolen crown. Her fingers had gone white around the dragonbone handles, but she did not release them. Pride held where strength had started to fail. The trapped false flame twisted between the iron jaws, still feeding from the bride vault channel beneath the cracked dais, still pushing heat toward the sealed launch frame Brielle Ashen was fighting to keep alive. Tool right transfer used to bypass maker safety test. The words remained on the pressure slate. No one in the Royal Fireworks Foundry needed Rennick to explain them. A tool had been given to a bride before the bride proved she could keep a crowd breathing. Dragon King Tavor Merrick looked at the slate, then at Brielle's silver-split hands braced around the vent bar. "Who conducts a maker safety test?" he asked. Brielle did not look at him. "The current tool, right holder, and 3 foundry witnesses." "Can it be done now?" Eryssa laughed, sharp with pain. "Now? While fire is locked in my hands?" Brielle looked at her. "That is usually when truth becomes useful." Lord Voust Rennick stepped forward in the council gallery. Emergency conditions allow temporary flame handling under royal authority. The king may appoint Brielle Ashen to stabilize the display without disturbing bride right. Temporary. The word landed exactly where it was meant to. Useful hands. Disposable name. Brielle's mouth tightened. "No." Tavor turned toward her. "No? If you appoint me temporary, the record will say I assisted the bride. It will say tool right remained with Eryssa and I performed emergency labor under royal command." Erissa's eyes flashed. "Because that is what you are asking to do." "No," Brielle said. "I am asking the foundry to tell the truth before I save what your truth almost burned." The launch frame groaned. Soline's voice cut from the high vent. "Pressure is climbing again." The false flame stretched toward the source channel, hungry for the valve floor beneath it. Brielle twisted the vent bar harder. Pain opened in bright silver down her fingers. Tavor took half a step. She said, "No dragon heat." He stopped immediately. That obedience, so late and so necessary, did not soften her. But it kept the flame from feeding. "What does foundry law require?" he asked. Brielle glanced at the workers. "Not king's favor. Witness." Tavor faced the firing floor. "Then speak it." Rennick snapped. "Majesty, foundry law cannot override royal bride. Right during active ceremony." Brielle looked up at the council gallery. "Foundry law is the reason active ceremony has witnesses left to impress." A low murmur moved among the workers. Master Vent Keeper Soline stepped from the high vent just far enough for her voice to carry. "Tool. Right belongs to the hand proven before fire, not the title displayed before witnesses." The furnace tongs flared. Eryssa flinched. Tomenvale, soot-faced and terrified, lifted his chin. "A holder must pass maker safety before touching launch flame." Hessamorn spoke from the dye trough. "Dyed flame cannot enter a sealed frame under untested tool right." 3 witnesses. 3 laws. Sample. Ugly. Alive. Tavor looked at Brielle. "Under worker witness, Brielle Ashen holds true tool, right of the furnace tongs." The foundry did not cheer. This was not victory. This was a door opening during a fire. Eryssa's face went cold. "You would strip your bride in front of every royal house because workers frightened you?" Tavor's voice stayed controlled. "No, because they warned me, and I let your review bury it. Not apology, admission, bare enough to hurt." Brielle did not give him her eyes for it. The furnace tongs shifted. Not open. Not free. One handle pulled against Eryssa's grip and angled toward Brielle. Eryssa clutched tighter. They were given to me. Brielle stepped closer. They were displayed on you. The false flame thrashed. Solene shouted. Source feed touching the launch throat. Brielle seized the offered handle. Pain tore through her old burns so sharply her vision whitened. The tongs knew her hand. Not lovingly, not gently. A tool did not comfort the person who understood it. It demanded accuracy. Eryssa tried to wrench away. Do not fight me, Brielle said. You will make me look guilty. You are holding the proof. Tavor moved toward the burst line and stopped beside the gallery stairs, exactly where danger would reach first if the frame failed. Brielle noticed. She hated that she noticed. Stand there, she said. If the frame tears, get them out. He nodded once. Done. No argument. No command over her hands. Good. Brielle turned the tongs one narrow degree. Solene, high vent. Ready. Toman, low seam. Ready. Hessa trough. Open. Brielle twisted the tongs down, not opening the jaws, only bending the trapped false flame away from the launch throat and toward the bleed trough. The red fire fought her. Eryssa sobbed once through clenched teeth. The frame screamed, then breathed. For one heartbeat, the pressure dropped. The crowd above gasped as red heat streamed upward through the proper vent instead of sideways toward the gallery. Then something beneath the bridal dais snapped. A hidden iron clasp shot free from the cracked gold tile and struck the pressure slate. The slate split wider. Black-red light rose from beneath the ceremony floor and wrapped around the trapped flame like a vow taking shape. Eryssa went utterly still. Rennek whispered, no. Brielle felt the tongs tremble in her hands. The false flame was not merely dyed. It had been tied to the wedding rite itself. Across the broken slate, new words burned. Bride vault source, bound to ceremony vow. Above the foundry, the first royal vow bell began to ring. The vow bell did not sound like celebration. It sounded like a fuse. One deep note rolled down through the royal fireworks foundry, and the black-red light beneath the bridal dais rose higher, wrapping itself around the trapped false flame inside the furnace tongs. The fire answered the bell as if it had been waiting for the marriage rite to feed it. Bride vault source bound to ceremony vow. The words burned across the broken pressure slate. Brielle Ashen held one handle of the tongs. Lady Eryssa Vale held the other. Between them, the false flame twisted in the locked iron jaws, no longer pretending to be only dyed ceremonial red. Something darker moved under the color now, hungry and patient. Dragon King Tavor Merrick stood at the gallery stairs, exactly where Brielle had placed him. He looked toward the vow tower above the open roof shutters. How many bells? Rennek answered before Brielle could. 3. The first opens the vow. The second binds the witness flame. The third completes royal recognition. Tavor's eyes moved to Brielle. What happens at the third? She felt the tongs tremble. If that flame is still tied to the vow, it becomes accepted as royal compatibility. Eryssa lifted her chin despite the pain in her hands. Then let the rite continue. Every worker on the floor turned toward her. She did not look ashamed. She looked desperate enough to become dangerous. The flame will settle once recognized, Eryssa said. That is what vow binding does. It gives ceremony a shape. Brielle stared at her. It gives a lie a crown. A sharp murmur moved through the foundry. Eryssa's eyes flashed. You are not a priestess. You are not counsel. You are not bride. Do not speak of vows as if Soot teaches law. No, Brielle said. Soot teaches what law leaves for other people to clean. The false flame jerked toward the launch throat. Brielle twisted the tongs down, forcing the flame back toward the bleed trough. Hessa opened the trough wider. Solene held the high vent. Toman braced the low seam, his young arms shaking. The pressure dropped by a hair. Not enough. The second bell began to gather above them. Brielle felt it before it rang. The tongs felt it too. They tightened around the false flame so hard that Eryssa cried out and nearly lost her grip. Brielle caught the angle before the jaws swung toward the sealed frame. "Do not pull against me," Brielle snapped. Eryssa breathed through clenched teeth. "Then save it." "I am. Save the sky bloom." Brielle looked at her. "I am saving the people under it." Rennick called from the council gallery. "If the vow flame is interrupted after first bell, the bride may be publicly marked incompatible without formal tribunal. That is irreversible." Brielle gave a bitter laugh. "The gallery burning is also irreversible." Tavor looked at Rennick. "Why was a bride vault source bound to the vow before compatibility was proven?" Rennick's mouth tightened. "Wedding continuity requires confidence." "That is not an answer. It is the answer courts survive on," Eryssa said. There it was. Not confession, philosophy. The truth nobles used when confession would be too crude. If enough people believed a thing at the right moment, law could be made to follow after. The second vow bell rang. The sound struck the flame. Black-red light shot from beneath the dais into the tongs, and the trapped fire swelled against the iron jaws. The pressure slate flashed. Vow witness flame binding. Source feed increasing. Unsafe to complete third bell. Families in the gallery were moving now, hurried along by guards. Servants carried older women down the inner stairs. House daughters in flame silk stumbled with fear on their faces. Yet the royal houses did not fully leave. They hovered at safe distance, still wanting to witness the wedding miracle they had come to applaud. Brielle hated them for that. Then she hated herself for wasting breath on hatred. "Solene," she said, "if I bleed it into the trough now, what remains?" Solene looked at the slate. Enough to stop the sideburst. Not enough to prove vow binding after the fire cools. Eryssa heard it. Her smile returned in pieces. "Then do it. Save them. Let history decide the rest." Brielle understood the trap. If she vented the false flame completely into the die trough now, the gallery would live. The launch frame would hold. The wedding could be paused under emergency confusion. Later, the Fire Council would write that a frightened worker misread ceremonial flame. Eryssa would claim she had obeyed certification. Rennick would call every line on the slate heat distortion. And Tavor's court would survive by forgetting exactly where danger had stood. If Brielle did not vent, the third bell might make the lie royal before it exploded. Tavor saw the choice form on her face. "Tell me how to preserve the proof," he said. She did not look at him. "You should have wanted that before the fire turned toward the gallery." He took the blow without defending himself. "I know. Not apology. Not enough. But not denial." The furnace tongs shifted in Brielle's hand, angling the trapped flame toward the pressure slate instead of the trough. Brielle went still. The tongs were not solving the truth. They were offering a place to burn it. She looked at Solene. "Can the slate hold vow fire?" Solene's eyes widened. "Only if it is grounded by tool, right and witness heat. Meaning? Your hands, our vents." "And the king's seal kept away from the flame until after it writes." Tavor heard that clearly. "My seal? If you seal too early, you certify it again," Brielle said. His face went cold. "Good." He understood the danger of himself now. Brielle turned the tongs toward the slate. The false flame fought, bucking inside the jaws. Eryssa tried to pull back. "No," Eryssa hissed. Brielle's eyes met hers. "Afraid of history deciding?" The third bell began to draw breath. Brielle slammed the trapped flame down toward the pressure slate without opening the tongs. Solene opened the high vent. Tommen locked the low seam. Hessa fed bleed heat around the slate edge. The black surface cracked wider, then drank the false flame's red light. Words began to burn. Vow flame source. Bride vault. Bound before compatibility test. Requesting party. The third bell struck. The pressure slate went white, and the final name began to form. The final name formed slowly, not because the slate struggled to write it, because every powerful person in the Royal Fireworks Foundry seemed to hold their breath against the possibility that fire might spell what mouths had been trained to avoid. The pressure slate burned white beneath the locked jaws of the Furnace Tongs. Brielle Ashen held one handle, Lady Eryssa Vale held the other, and between them the false flame thrashed like a living accusation forced into language. Requesting party. The letters seared deeper. Lady Eryssa Vale. The gallery broke into sound. Not outrage at first. Recognition. The ugly gasp of people discovering that the beautiful thing they had applauded had been aimed over their heads and through their bodies. Eryssa's face went still. A bride requests many ceremonial elements. The answer was immediate. Too polished, too practiced. Rennick stepped forward in the council gallery, red scale-cloth catching the white glare. The request of Vowflame Source does not prove knowledge of technical danger. It proves ceremonial ambition. Brielle looked at him. Ceremonial ambition closed the gaps. No, Eryssa said sharply. Bride right refined the frame, refined it into a weapon, Brielle answered. The false flame slammed against the iron jaws. The furnace tongs did not open. They held. That was all they could do. The rest still required living witnesses. Tavor Merrick stood near the gallery stairs, his dragon gold eyes fixed on the slate. The third bell had rung, but its power had not completed. The Valfire was caught between ceremony and proof, trapped on the slate before royal recognition could swallow it. He looked at Rennick. Who witnessed the request? Rennick's expression tightened. Council procedure. Name. Silence. Brielle felt the tongs pull toward the slate again. Not to reveal everything. To ask the right heat from the right hand. She pressed her burned palm against the side of the black surface. Pain split through her old scars in thin silver lines. Solene, she said. The vent keeper understood at once. Witness heat? Yes. Solene set one scarred hand near Brielle's, not touching the flame. Tommen and Hessa stepped close, each placing a worker's hand against the slate edge. The white glare steadied. A new line formed. Witnessing council hand. Voust Rennick. Rennick went pale. Eryssa turned on him. You told me the category was sufficient. Rennick's mouth hardened. And you told us royal recognition mattered more than foundry hesitation. There it was. Not confession. Collision. Two polished lies striking each other hard enough to show their seams. Tavor's voice came low. You both knew the test had not been passed. Eryssa lifted her chin. I knew the council certified me. Rennick said. I knew the bride requested continuity. Brielle's laugh came out rough. And I knew the frame would burst sideways. Which one of us did the court call obstruction? No one answered. The slate did. Worker warning altered. Maker safety test bypassed. Vow flame source bound before proof. The false flame shrieked. The white glare flickered red. Solene swore. It is trying to leave the slate. Brielle looked at the pressure and Asians. And Ader rose and at still cells. An 1888 4. An AT-10 merely been forced to show its shape. The false flame still wanted the launch throat, still wanted recognition, still wanted the third bell to become law after the sound had already rung. Eryssa saw the same thing and seized it. If she cannot hold it, she proves why tool right transfer was necessary. Brielle did not look at her. She looked at Tavor. Do not seal it. His jaw tightened. If I do not seal the interruption, the vow may complete through the old channel. If you seal too early, you certify the false flame as royal. Rennick spoke quickly. Majesty, a royal seal can stabilize the rite. Brielle's eyes did not leave Tavor's. That is what they told you before. The words struck him exactly where they needed to. He stopped. Not because he trusted himself, because he finally did not. The foundry trembled. The launch frame groaned. Families had been pushed farther back, but the burst lines still glowed on the slate, close enough to remind everyone that proof did not save bodies unless someone acted correctly after it appeared. Brielle turned to the workers. We bleed it in thirds. Not all at once. Solene nodded. High vent first. Toman, low seam. Ready, he said, voice shaking. Hessa, trough. Open. Eryssa's grip tightened. You cannot bleed vow flame without bride consent. Brielle met her eyes. You lost consent when you fed it with other people's lives. The furnace tongs flared at the sentence. Not choosing a bride, not choosing a queen, recognizing a safety law older than ceremony. Brielle twisted the tongs 1 degree toward the trough. The false flame tore against the jaws. Eryssa screamed and tried to pull away. Tavor moved not toward the tongs but toward Eryssa's side, blocking her from dragging the flame toward the launch throat. He did not touch the fire. He did not take control. He became a wall where Brielle placed him. That was all. And for the first time it was useful. Hold, Brielle ordered. The workers held. The first third of red flame bled into the dye trough, hissing violently as Hessa cut it with ash salt. The pressure slate dimmed from white to silver. A line appeared at the bottom. Proof recorded under worker witness. Rennick shouted, Incomplete without royal seal. Tavor looked at Brielle. She shook her head once. Not yet. He obeyed. The second bleed came harder. The false flame fought with the sound of tearing silk and cracking bone. The plated launch frame buckled, but Solene opened the high vent wider, and the heat climbed upward instead of sideways. The slate wrote again, false compatibility, invalid. Eryssa's face broke then, not into guilt, into fury. You think he will want ash after this? She whispered to Brielle. You think a king loves the woman who ruins his wedding? Brielle's hands shook around the tongs. The words should not have hurt. They did. Not because she believed she wanted Tavor's love, because Eryssa still thought the worst wound was not being wanted. Brielle leaned closer through the heat. I did not come here to be wanted, she said. I came here because fire was being lied to. The furnace tongs tightened one final time. The last third of the false flame ripped free of the vow channel and struck the pressure slate. A final line appeared. Royal seal required for public reversal of tool right law. The foundry went silent. This time, Brielle looked at Tavor first, not pleading, measuring, because the next mistake would not only burn a ceremony, it would decide whether every maker's hand in the kingdom could be taken again and called honor. The royal seal waited in Tavor Merrick's hand like a second flame. No one in the royal fireworks foundry moved toward him. Not the council, not the bride, not the workers holding the vents open, while the last breath of false fire trembled across the cracked pressure slate. Royal seal required for public reversal of tool right law. Brielle Ashen read the line once. Then she looked at the furnace tongs, still locked between her hand and Eryssa's. The false flame had been bled down to a violet coal, small enough to contain, not small enough to trust. Heat still shook through the launch frame. The gold plating over the cooling gaps hung warped and blistered, beautiful ruin over the engineering it had tried to hide. Tavor stepped forward. Brielle said, "What?" He stopped. The old Tavor would have demanded why. This one held still. Brielle's burned hands tightened around the tongs. If you seal the slate now, it reverses this one ceremony. The council will call it exceptional flame failure by dawn. Redneck's face changed. Barely. Enough. Eryssa saw it too and seized the opening. Then seal it as ceremony failure. Spare the kingdom public disorder. Spare yourself the shame of letting a foundry worker rewrite royal law while holding your bride hostage. Brielle laughed once, low and tired. Still calling danger hostage when it finally stops obeying you. Eryssa's eyes burned. You ruined my wedding. No, Brielle said. You tied it to a lie and asked fire to bless it? The trapped coal snapped inside the tongs. Tavor looked at the slate. What must the seal touch? Brielle did not answer him first. She turned to the workers. Soline, the old vent keeper, straightened by the high vent, soot streaked across her cheek. What is tool, right? Soline's voice carried through the foundry. Responsibility before display. Tommen, the young shell apprentice swallowed. A holder must pass safety before touching launch flame. Hissa. The dye keeper lifted her ash salt-stained hands. Dyed flame belongs to open air, unless a maker certifies the frame. Brielle looked at the gallery, where nobles had gone silent behind their guards. All who stand under fireworks should hear this. Tool right is not ornament. It is not bride favor. It is not noble inheritance. It is the right to refuse fire when refusal keeps people alive. The furnace tongs flared silver. Not around Eryssa, around the hinge. The pressure slate answered. Worker witness, complete. Tavor's hand closed around the royal seal. Rennick spoke sharply. Majesty, if you seal under worker witness, every transferred ceremonial tool right in the kingdom may be challenged. Tavor looked at him. Good. The word struck harder than anger. He crossed to the slate and knelt. Not before Brielle. Not before Eryssa. Before the record that workers had kept alive with burned hands. I seal the reversal under worker witness, he said. Tool right belongs to the proven hand. Bride right may not enter launch engineering. Council category may not override maker safety. A royal ceremony may not use hidden flame to counterfeit compatibility. He pressed the dragon seal to the slate. Bronze fire spread across the black surface. For one terrifying breath, Brielle thought the false flame would feed on it. But Tavor lifted his hand away before the seal became heat. Obedience to her warning. Obedience to the work. The slate burned with final words. False compatibility invalid. Bride right order void. Royal Fire Council certification suspended. Tool right restored to maker witness law. The furnace tongs opened. Not wide. Only enough. Brielle twisted the jaws down and released the last coal into the dye trough. Hessa threw ash salt over it. Soline opened the high vent. Tommen dropped the low seam. The red coal hissed, bucked, then collapsed into black glass. The launch frame stopped shaking. For the first time that night, the foundry breathed without fear. Eryssa's hands slid free of the tongs. The dragon-bone grips had left dark marks across her palms. She stared at them as if the tool had betrayed her, when all it had done was refuse to lie. Tavor turned to his guards. Lady Eryssa Vale and Lord Vaust Rennick will stand tribunal under public foundry witness. Open the bride vault. Open the Fire Council review chambers. Every altered warning will be read in full. Rennick went rigid. Majesty, this will damage confidence in royal fire. Brielle looked at him. No. It will damage confidence in men who certify flame from safe distance. A low sound moved through the workers. Not applause. Recognition. That was better. Tavor faced Brielle then. The foundry watched him watch her. The woman he had ignored, the hands he had let be stripped, the maker whose warnings had been marked obstruction until fire forced the court to read them. I will not ask forgiveness tonight, he said. Good, Brielle answered. Pain crossed his face, but he accepted it. What do you ask? Brielle looked at the launch frame. Remove the gold plating. All of it. He nodded. Done. Restore every tool. Right transferred by title without safety test. Done. Foundry workers testify before nobles touch ceremonial flame again. Done. And you do not call my hands when fire is dangerous unless you listened when they warned you before it was. Tavor's throat moved. For a moment the Dragon King looked less like a crowned flame and more like a man standing in the ash of his own certainty. Done, he said. By dawn, the Royal Fireworks Foundry no longer wore wedding gold. Workers stripped the plated beauty from the launch frame and reopened every cooling gap by measurement, not taste. The pressure slate was chained above the central furnace, not as decoration, but as warning. The furnace tongs were returned to the black iron wall where maker tools rested between uses. Brielle placed them there herself. Tavor stood several paces behind her, not touching, not claiming, waiting where she had told him to wait. Outside, the wedding banners came down. The first safe sky bloom rose instead from a worker's test shell, small and silver, vented properly into the morning air. It did not roar for a bride. It did not flatter a king. It opened cleanly above the foundry roof, harmless and exact. Brielle watched the silver fire fade. Tavor's voice came quietly behind her. Will you teach me how to read the gaps? She did not look back at once. When she did, her eyes held no forgiveness yet. Only possibility, which was harder to earn. Start by standing where the heat reaches, she said. The Dragon King stepped beside the open vent. And Brielle Ashen, true holder of the furnace tongs, let the morning see her hands full again.